Listening 76. Listen and read. Where is the treasure at the end of the story?
Wow! Look at all these coins!
Who put them there? What shall we do with them?
Finn won't believe what we found.
Has anyone got any water? My water bottle's empty.
2 hours later.
Finally! The rain stopped. Let's go outside.
Listen, can you hear a whistle? Yes. Look, I can see Finn. Finn, we're over here.
Are you all right? What's in that chest?
Well, we didn't find any flags, but we did find some treasure.
That's amazing!
2 days later.
Wow! We're in the newspaper. We're famous!
Yes, and the museum is really pleased to have the coins.
It's thanks to me. If we hadn't got lost, we wouldn't have found the treasure.
Listening 77. Listen and repeat.
Rope. Water bottle. Penknife. First aid kit. Whistle. Fishing line. Needle and thread. Matches.
Listening 78. Listen and repeat.
Flower. Here. Buy. Scene. Meet. See.
Listening 79. Listen and read. What has Professor invented?
This is my new survival suit. It will keep me warm in the Arctic and cool in the desert. I'm feeling very cool.
You're looking too cold, Professor. I don't think your survival suit is working. That suit is dangerous. If I hadn't been here, you would have become ice.
Don't be silly, Chip. If you had been out, I would have turned it off myself. It just needs a little more work.
Listening 80. Listen and read. What is the information for?
Trekking in the jungle. Information. Advice. You should wear light clothes and strong boots. You should also wear a big hat, as the sun is very hot in the jungle. You shouldn't bring valuable possessions, such as jewellery, but you ought to bring a camera, because you will want to take lots of photos. Rules. You must stay with your guide at all times. Do not walk into the jungle on your own. You mustn't pick up or touch any animals. Some of these will be dangerous. What to bring? You don't have to bring any food, but you have to bring a water bottle. Drinking water is very important when it's hot.
Listening 81. Listen and read.
Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Robinson Crusoe was sailing to Africa when his ship hit the rocks in a terrible storm. He swam to the shore and discovered he was the only survivor. The next day, he swam out to his shipwreck. It was on some rocks near the island. He brought back tools and other useful supplies. Then he looked for a place to build a shelter.
There were some hills around me, so I decided to build myself a little house on one of them. I walked to the top of the highest hill and looked down. I was very unhappy, because I saw then that I was on an island. There were 2 smaller islands a few miles away, and after that, only the sea. Just the sea, for mile after mile after mile. I was all alone. After a time, I found a little cave in the side of the hill. In front of it, there was a good place to make a home. So, I used the ship's sails, rope, and pieces of wood, and after a lot of hard work, I had a very fine tent. The cave at the back of my tent was a good place to keep my food, and so I called it my kitchen. That night, I went to sleep in my new home. The next day, I thought about the possible dangers on the island. Were there wild animals, and perhaps wild people too, on my island? I didn't know, but I was very afraid. So I decided to build a very strong fence. I cut down young trees and put them in the ground in a half circle around the front of my tent. I used many of the ship's ropes too, and in the end, my fence was as strong as a stone wall. I felt safer when I'd finished the fence. No one could get over it, through it, or round it.
Listening 82. Listen. What food did Robinson Crusoe make to eat?
I needed a table and a chair, and that was my next job. I had to work on them for a long time, but every time I wanted a piece of wood, I had to cut down a tree. It was long, slow, difficult work, and during the next months, I learnt to be very clever with my tools. I walked along the side of a little river. There, I found open ground without trees. Later, I came to more trees with many different fruits. I decided to take a lot of the fruit and to put it to dry in the sun for a time. Then I could keep it for many months. One day, I found a little bag. We used it on the ship to keep the chickens' food in. There was still some of the food in the bag, and I dropped some of it onto the ground. A month later, I saw something bright green there, and after 6 months, I had a very small field of corn. I was very excited. It is a lot of work to make bread from corn. Many people eat bread, but how many people can take corn from a field and make bread out of it without help? I had to learn and to make many new things, and it was a year before I cooked and ate my first bread.
Listening 83. Listen and write. Sing.
We're shipwrecked on an island in the middle of the deep blue sea. We eat fruit and plants for breakfast and lunch, and fish every day for tea. If we hadn't gone on a voyage, if there hadn't been a storm at sea, we wouldn't have been shipwrecked on an island, eating fish every day for tea. We're shipwrecked on an island in the middle of the deep blue sea. We sleep in a shelter that's made of leaves at the top of a very tall tree. If we hadn't gone on a voyage, if there hadn't been a storm at sea, we wouldn't have been shipwrecked on an island, eating fish every day for tea. We're shipwrecked on an island in the middle of the deep blue sea, but we've made a boat that we think will float, and soon we will be free.
Listening 84. Listen and read.
Where are we? I don't recognise this place.
I think we're lost. What shall we do?
I know. We could try ringing Mum and Dad.
That won't work. There's no phone signal.
You're right. I've got no signal. What can we do?
I think we should run. There's someone hiding behind that tree.
Listening 85. Listen to the conversations and write the solutions. 1.
Oh no, I've run out of sun cream.
I haven't got any either.
What shall I do? My skin will burn.
I think we should get out of the sun. There's a cafe over there. Let's go and have a lemonade.
Good idea. Let's go.
2.
Oh no! I think I dropped my money in the playground.
Do you need it for something?
Yes, it's for the bus home after school. What can I do?
You could try borrowing some money. I haven't got any, but I'm sure someone in our class has got some.
I'll ask Sam. He might have some.
3.
I don't recognise that hill or that river. I think we're lost.
You're right. I don't know where we are.
And look, the phones don't work, and we haven't got a map. What can we do?
Don't panic. I think we should try using the compass. Are we going north or south?
We're going south. Come on, it's this way.
4.
Oh no! My mobile phone hasn't got a signal, and I told my mum I'd ring her.
Let's have a look at my phone. No, I haven't got a signal either.
What shall I do?
You could try walking around the park. The signal might come back.
Good idea. Come on.
Listening 86. Listen and read.
Atlantis, the Lost City. The story of Atlantis is one of the oldest and most interesting mysteries in the world. Many people have written books about it, and made films too. So how did the story begin? Well, more than 2,000 years ago, a famous Greek writer called Plato wrote a story about a beautiful island in the Atlantic Ocean. He called it the Island of Atlantis. Plato described the people and the island in a lot of detail. He said that the people were very rich and successful. He said there were talented engineers and architects who built fantastic palaces, houses, harbours and tunnels all over the island. They built the capital city on a hill, and this was surrounded by 5 rings of water and land. All around the city were fields and mountains. The people were very good at farming. They kept animals in their fields and grew many different things, so there was always lots of food on the island. There was also lots of fresh water, and the farmers built a system for watering their fields. The richest people on the island lived in the highest mountains. Plato described the amazing buildings they lived in. He said that there were beautiful fountains with hot and cold water, gold statues and stone walls covered in precious metals and jewels. In the story of Atlantis, Plato described how clever and peaceful the people were. They loved art and beautiful things, and they lived happily and successfully together. He said that they were friendly with their neighbours on the different islands and never went to war. But then he described how they changed. As they grew richer, the people of Atlantis became selfish and greedy. They started to argue and fight with each other and the people from the other islands. Then, one day, something terrible happened. There was a huge earthquake, and great waves covered the island of Atlantis until it disappeared under the sea. In the story, Plato said that this was a punishment because the people had become so bad. For over 2,000 years, everyone thought the island of Atlantis was just a fantastic story. Then, in the late 1800s, people started to think differently. It all started with an American man named Donnelly. He was a politician and a writer, and he became very interested in the story of Atlantis. He started to think that Plato had described a real place and a real tragic event. Donnelly studied the history of floods and natural disasters from Egypt to Mexico. He studied things that had happened thousands of years ago. Then he wrote a book and explained his ideas. He thought the story was about a real natural disaster. Perhaps there was a hurricane or an earthquake in the Atlantic Ocean near the island at this time. Perhaps it destroyed the island of Atlantis and all its people. Donnelly's book was very popular, and more people started to think that the island of Atlantis was a real place. They started to have different ideas about where it might be and what had happened to it. Then, in the late 1960s, there was a new idea. A Greek historian discovered the ruins of an ancient city on the Greek island of Thera, which is also called Santorini. This Greek island is famous for its volcano. When the historian and his team examined the ruins of the ancient city, they found streets, buildings, pottery, and colourful wall paintings. All of these things were amazing, and they decided that a very successful group of people had once lived there. They thought perhaps these people were from the Minoan civilization. The Minoans were an ancient people that lived around 4,000 years ago on the islands in the Mediterranean. The historian and his team also decided that the ancient city on the island had been destroyed and buried by a volcanic eruption. So, was Thera the island that Plato had described in his books? Was Thera the island of Atlantis? Not everyone believes that the ruins on the island of Thera are the ruins of Atlantis. Many people think the ruined island lies far beneath the sea in a different part of the world. Some people say it's near the Andes Mountains in Bolivia. Others say it's close to Florida in the US. Other people think it was lost somewhere in Central America, the China Sea, or Africa. Of course, there are many more people that believe Atlantis is just a story. They say it was just a part of Plato's imagination. Whatever you think, the story of Atlantis is a great story and a great mystery.
Listening 87. Listen and read.
We didn't mean to go to sea. What has happened so far? John, Susan, Roger and Kitty Walker were staying by a river. They met a young man called Jim Brading, who invited them to go sailing on his sailing boat. Their mother agreed, but told them to stay on the river and not to go out to sea. The children sailed to the mouth of the river, but then the wind died. They tried to use the boat engine to go back up the river, but there wasn't any petrol. Jim rowed to land to get some more. While he was gone, fog suddenly appeared, and then the children realized they were floating out to sea. They decided they had to wait until morning before they could return to the shore. But when the fog finally disappeared, the rain started. At first, the rain was not too heavy, but then the wind quickly became strong, and out of the west behind them came a white wall of rain, falling down into the sea. It was still too dangerous to think of going back because they couldn't see anything through the rain. So they went on, and the wind blew them further and further from the land. When it finally stopped raining, the sky in front of them was already growing dark, and the boat was sailing faster and faster through the tall waves.
Let's turn back now, said Susan.
John took a deep breath. He wasn't sure that he could find his way back, but he didn't say this to the others.
All right, he said. I'll turn the boat around now.
The next moment, terrible things began to happen. When you are sailing with the wind behind you, you never really know how hard the wind is blowing. It's very different when you turn and sail against it. As the boat turned into the wind, a wave broke over it, and water flooded the boat. Up the boat came again, then down again, and then there was another big wave. The children were soon knee-deep in water. John was scared, but he tried to steer the boat against a sea and a wind that were too strong for him.
Stop! John, stop it! cried Susan at last. We'll have to turn round again. We can't do this.
Susan, almost shaken to pieces by the boat's new violent movement, lay across the side and was terribly sick. John slowly steered the boat round. Very slowly, the little boat turned away from the wind and back on her old course, with the wind behind them again. From the cabin, they heard Kitty's frightened voice. The boat was full of water, and she needed to get it out before they started sinking. Susan found the pump and began pumping hard to get the water out of the boat. It began to grow dark. The wind was still blowing hard, but the boat sailed on smoothly. Even Susan began to feel better. No one had fallen into the sea, everyone was safe, and soon the night would end. The sun would rise, the wind would stop, and they would sail back to land. Susan and Kitty didn't feel seasick anymore. John's arms hurt with steering, but he felt much happier. Roger was hungry and wondered if everyone had forgotten about supper.
Susan, he said, it's 10 o'clock. What about some chocolate or something?
10 o'clock? Said Susan in surprise.
It's time you all had something to eat.
And a few minutes later, they were all eating very large pieces of fruitcake and pieces of chocolate. Suddenly, Susan saw lights ahead.
There's a green light on one side and a red light on the other side. It's a big ferry on its way from Holland to England. It's coming this way, said John. Maybe they could take us back home,
said Roger.
It's getting nearer and nearer. I can see it very clearly.
But they can't see us, shouted John suddenly.
We've got no lights, and it's coming straight towards us. We've got to get out of the way. We've got to warn them. Roger, sound the horn.
John was very frightened as the boat was coming straight towards them, and it was very big. Roger sounded the horn. Someone on the ferry heard the loud noise of the horn, and at the last minute, the ferry changed course. The green light of the big ship disappeared, and it went quickly past their little boat, almost touching its sides.
"Show your light, you stupid fishermen!"
came an angry voice from the ferry. Then the ferry had passed them and was off on its way to England. The waves that the ferry made were very big, and everyone was thrown from side to side and got very wet again. They were still in one piece, although they were sailing further and further away from England. An extract from a story by Arthur Ransom.